So this is the first of many outside expert interview sessions that we'll be doing only for the Blueprint community here, starting with a good friend of mine, Chris Dreyer. He's the CEO of Rankings.io. It is a SEO, we'll call it search marketing agency now, dabbling in some other service areas, but really started just with SEO, just for personal injury attorneys as well, up to about $13 million in annual revenue, 35 bodies. Chris is a wealth of knowledge when it comes to building an agency. Really excited here. I got a bunch of questions for him. If you have any questions for him too, drop it in the chat as we get through this as well. Once I get through my questions, if you want to ask him a question directly, I'll just call on you and you can ask him directly. So join me in welcoming Chris. What's up, Chris? How we doing?
Thanks for the intro. Yeah, happy to be here. And guys, I want to preface this open book, right? I don't know very many people that would unveil anything, but if you want to know whatever you want to know, like this is the time. I know some people hold it tight to the chest, but whatever you guys want to know.
Yeah, and he means that too. I've learned a lot from Chris. Again, Chris is an extremely nice guy, but also a very savvy business person. To take a single service company, which is just SEO, for a single type of avatar to $10+ million is incredibly impressive. So Chris, let's start there. You have a book behind you. It's called Niching Up. Why don't you walk us through how you arrived at personal injury attorneys? Because inside the Blueprint, we teach a lot about, we call it positioning, right? So dialing in on that single avatar and building an offer that makes sense for that avatar. Obviously, you're a big proponent of it. You wrote a book about that. Why don't you tell us your story about how you arrived at working with specifically personal injury attorneys?
Yeah. And I'll give you the accelerated version. So I went to college and I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I was making mom and dad happy and was a terrible student, partied a lot, and somehow ended up with a history education degree. Got a job at a high school as a detention room supervisor, got into affiliate marketing by the end of my second year. I was making about $16,000 a month in affiliate marketing, selling things like acai fruit, the acai berries, I had chin wraps for double chins. I had all kinds of stuff. I was doing well, got hit by that first penguin algorithm, nuked me down to about 2K, got on Craigslist, applied everywhere, got hired by 3 agencies, and I accepted all 3 jobs. They were all remote. I had an affiliate team, and I was the best employee at all 3 because I had a team, and saw the inner workings of the agency life and decided to start my own agency in 2013. So about 10 years ago, I started at the time as attorneyrankings.org. At the beginning, I did everything, right? It's like I was trying to generate revenue. It's like whatever crazy project they would send me, I would do. Like even the terrible ones, the terrible clients, I would really charge super low fees because I didn't have testimonials. I didn't have case studies. I didn't have a lot of proof. And it just built onto that, kind of narrowed my focus to SEO. And it was just legal SEO for maybe 6 years. And then I heard this Seth Godin podcast where he was talking about, he wrote Purple Cow, and Purple Cow's about standing out in a crowded space and being remarkable. And I looked at my data and I found that over 70% of my revenue was from less than 40% of my clientele, which was personal injury law firms, personal injury attorneys, not just attorneys in general. So I made the pivot. And at the time, I wish I wouldn't have done this. So I'll tell you, here's one lesson. I just took all my non-PI and I referred them out. And that did give me a lot of focus. And sure, I made a little bit of money from referring those out, but I wish I would have done that a little bit more strategically. Someone that could have reciprocated and then filled my pipeline full of PI. So it was like a one-way thing where I got a little bit of money and went to PI, and I ran PI all the way up to about 10.5 million. And now this year we widened our TAM a couple months ago. We're back focusing on all areas of the law. I can happy to discuss that decision, but that's the trajectory. My background, my skill set, like Ryan, I'm at the top of Bloom's taxonomy for SEO, super SEO nerd, but really vested in a digital marketing game.
Chris, when it comes to, we obviously work with law firms too, and the deeper that I get into it too, I fully understand why you settled on personal injury, right? Because I think that from an outside looking in, and this is something I talk about a lot inside the Blueprint, right? Which is, it's not enough to just be like, I'm B2B or I want to work with lawyers, right? It's the first step, but then you start going through the process and you're like, oh, okay, there's nuances to this game. There's nuance to this business. And when I started learning more about law, because admittedly, I sold you a blog post 4 or so years ago because I was like, I don't want to work with lawyers. I can't stand them. But now as I've grown and I matured, I actually quite enjoy working with them because they care about one thing and one thing only, and that's phone calls, right? They care about qualified leads, phone calls. They don't want to deal with anything. They don't want to write cut. They just give me results and I'll pay your check, right? Now, within that, though, there's a big difference between criminal defense or personal injury or family law or business law, right? A case value just swings so widely, right? So you said you opened it up outside of personal injury. Do you still have a focus within that, or and how do you price
Oh
that? Do
yeah.
you change your pricing based on the type of lawyer? How does that work for you?
So we have 70 clients and probably 65 are personal injury. And the deal with personal injury is they have these asynchronous bets, right? And we don't want to talk, it's taboo to talk about, but let's just talk about it. Somebody gets in an accident and loses an arm, or there's a wrongful death, they may get a few $1,000,000, right? So it can be a situation where they're undisciplined business owners, but there's just a lot of money in these asynchronous wins, right? And the market's incredibly saturated, so it demands expertise. If you are focusing on trademark attorneys and there's one in the city, they don't need your help because they just put up a GBP profile and they automatically rank. So you're looking for competition. So that's different than, I would say, most advisors. They say, hey, go to this area where nobody's at. There's a reason why nobody's there, right? There's no money. So I'm different. There's exceptions to every rule, right? The reason I opened up is just because we are so heavily weighted in most of the major metros. So we can talk about TAM, we can talk about opportunities, but really you're hitting those major metropolitan areas, right? That's where the people are hiring you. That's who really need your help for the most part. And you can saturate that. And there's a whole conversation, and I can give you my opinion on geographic exclusivity. I know that is a huge point of contention for agency owners, but I opened it up because even though it's still in law, there's still a whole new editorial calendar. There's just a lot of opportunity, and I had a lot of waste. Okay, so I was ranking number 1. I think we're number 3 right now for SEO for lawyers. We rank for a lot of SEO terms. We do Google ads, and we had all this waste. We kept saying no, and after looking at the CRM and how much we were referring out, we eventually said, okay, it's time. Let's take these clients. So that's the reason that we opened up after.
So did you guys, obviously some of your contracts, I actually interviewed you probably like 3 or 4 years ago on this same platform. And I remember at the time you were doing probably like maybe 5 or so million with something stupid like 8 employees like that. And it was because your contracts were like 50 a month, very high ticket, very high competition, personal injury in major metro markets. As you scaled out, I would imagine too, right? Again, the more I've learned about the legal space specifically, you realize that 90% of the market is dominated by 2% of the firms, right? There's some guys out there that are just spending their faces off because they know one case for them is 10 million, 100 million bucks. They're willing to just step on the backs of everyone else just to suppress their voices, whatever. And those people they're making a lot of money. But the rest of the market, and what I found too, and I'm sure obviously you're aware of this, is that there's a massive middle class there of good, solid businesses, 1 to 3 million a year in revenue. They have the budget to spend, but they're either priced out or they're just working with somebody who's, I don't want to name names for other agencies, but they're charging $1,000 a month and doing nothing. Because what are you really going to do for $1,000 a month? So
Yeah.
when you decided to open up, did you change your pricing model? And was that based on, for example, divorce, right? Divorce cases can still be 30 grand or so, good amount, but it's very different than 30 million. So did you change your pricing structure when you work with different areas of law?
Oh yeah, you have to, because what the value is worth for them changes, even in the geography. So we could have a client in, say, St. Louis and one versus Los Angeles. It could be the same scope, but what you would charge would be different because of the value delivering is different. And there's a lot of education that you can dive into around this. Alan Weiss, Pricing Creativity by Blair Enns. I think Alan has another book called $1 Million Consulting. So it's value-based pricing, and it's getting away from selling your time for money. The interesting thing is every area has different avatars, right? It's iSpace. There's a lot of former athlete trial attorneys, right? Zero-sum games. They're really focused on status, and how you market them is different than going to be, say, a criminal defense attorney or family law attorney. So that goes into your marketing. There's a lot to it. What was the original part of that question, Ryan?
No, it's all good. It's just how, so if you're working on a PI case, because the way I look at it is that we'll just talk about it, right? So let's say you have a PI client and a family law divorce attorney. Divorce is still a good space within legal because, again, they're making money. It's an unfortunate thing, right? In this country, it's just crazy divorces, but like they're expensive, they're long, and there's a lot of them. And also for every one divorce, there's 2 clients, right? There's a surplus of divorces happening, and they're always going to be happening. PI is also tough because the government's constantly changing laws. The PI is constantly going in flux in terms. They're also relying on like major tragedies to like really mesothelioma, et cetera, right? So let's say you have 2 leads that come in, or 2 clients. One is a divorce lawyer. The other one is a car accident lawyer, right? Mm-hmm. How do you price the difference of them? And is there a difference in the actual scope of work? Do you have to do a different scope of work to get results for personal injury versus family law? Or is it just the same? You're just pricing it different and you're just changing your pricing to work with that lower client?
Really good question. So we can go super deep here. Let me focus on PI here to answer your
Sure.
question.
Yeah.
Even if I just grab personal injury, 2 types of firms, right? There are pre-lit firms where they're never taking court cases to trial. They scale by volume. They're settling everything. They're solving for the average of what a case has historically went for, and they have better cash flow. They're staffed differently. They don't have as many trial attorneys. And in fact, they have way more headcount. And so they have a certain type of expectation and goals. And they may take cases that have lower injury thresholds, right? So they're taking those like minor soft tissue injuries. And then you have the trial attorneys that maybe will take just a couple cases a month, but they want those cases to be 7 figures, all of them. So even in that scenario, you would potentially price different based upon their goals. But anyone, it's how much do you want to dominate? Do you want to just dominate your market? Do you want to have a lifestyle type experience? And these are questions that happen in the qualification process. You can do applications and scoping before that, but I find that it's really important to get to their really underlying needs and wants in that first qualification call. And yeah, so the scope will change, the price will change. The other thing too, this raises the question, you can look inwardly. So even agencies in general, and not everything's binary, but let's just say in general, you can scale through productization, where you scale by volume and you are solving for the average, right? You think that most clients want this thing. They want X amount of links, X amount of content, or you can solve for the individual, the client. And that's where you can go super deep, super bespoke. Everything's a blank canvas. So it's also like what you want. It's how much value. When you're solving for the individual, you can actually provide more value to them because you're looking at them and everything you can do for them, versus solving for an average where you need more volume. And there's a lot to this, but it's really designing your agency how you want, and that will determine the scope and pricing too.
So when you take on a client, Chris, especially because you mentioned productization, right? We talk a lot about productization inside the blueprint too. Something I always recommend, especially if you're doing less than $15,000 a month. It's like a must. You have to have a productized service. You're going to drive yourself crazy trying to figure it out, unless you've got a very high ticket client on the other end, like a PI attorney, but you're probably not, your first client that you sign is not going to be 50 grand a month. It's just not going to happen. You have to earn your way into that situation, right? So when you were only working with PI, for example, right, you were only doing SEO. So, and you also mentioned the exclusivity. It's pretty straightforward. If it's a New York PI attorney, they're going to pay you for that exclusivity. You sign a contract, you're only working with them. So point I'm trying to make is that you're basically doing the same thing over and over again, basically just in a new market. So were you just like copying, pasting project plans? Were you doing the same thing? Are you doing pretty much the same thing over and over again? And also, how do you treat that when it comes to like content and links? So for example, if you're doing the same thing over and over again, are you basically just using templated content and just switching out keywords and then getting the links from the same sources? How do you handle that?
Good question. So we build a custom editorial calendar pulled from an original database. So like we'll have, here's all the topics, review and see what they have, and then we'll go do it. But we already have that research done. So it is productized. When we're doing before the qualification call, we're looking to see what the gap is in terms of referring domain. We're looking at things like the amount of content that they need and what content needs to be enhanced. But it is a lot of productization. We're not to the degree where we're just swapping out titles and things like that, but very similar sources. And it's very Six Sigma mindset. It's eliminating waste. So when you have just one practice area, you're doing keyword research one time.
Yeah.
And you get profitability by not having to do that repeatedly. When you have websites that are excellent link opportunities, you get that because you don't have the research component. That's profit. And when you're eliminating all these things that are bespoke, that you're eliminating waste in it, and it leads to profitability and efficiency. So there are a couple ways to do it, right? There's hybrids. Some organizations, if you look at disruptive advertising, is a good example. They have an enterprise division, right? Their enterprise division could be staffed and where you could do some of those bespoke things, and they keep it contained. And that would be like a hybrid version, or you just go pure productization. Productization is typically where you see the prices on the front. You can see them like, this is what it is. We're solving for the average. This is what you get. Versus the custom, typically you have to do that diagnosis to get the custom pricing because everything's different.
Yeah. Yeah. It's great to hear you say all these things. These are literally things that we talk about and preach. It's so encouraging to see it play out at the level that you're operating to. And I think that the part of that too is when you really find, again, like I talk about this a lot inside the blueprint, I talk about this concept of market offer fit. So what I mean by that is you've identified the right avatar. That's part one. But part two is putting together an offer that makes sense for them. So you obviously hit out of the park, because what I tell people a lot inside of here is that the end result of your service, whether it's SEO or Facebook, whatever it is that you're doing, has to result in a conversion, right? Because otherwise, to your point, like people are going to expect some level of bespoke customization, time, attention. If they're going to pay you 50 grand a month and you're not driving that much business value exponentially or more, you're not going to be able to charge that on a productized service model, right? Which means then you have a model that is big consulting, that is always going to require you to go out and find extremely intelligent people that are extremely expensive. They're always jumping around company to company, right? But when you have this perfect combination of who plus what, which is the market plus a service that's going to drive business results for them, you can charge based on the margin, right? And if a PI attorney is they're expecting to make $1 million plus more per case, one, you don't have to drive a ton of volume, right? Two, you get them a couple cases and they paid your retainer for years, right? So you basically build this business model that you can stack on top of, and you stack a few of those clients. Next thing you know, you got a couple $1 million in revenue in the bank for off of a couple headcount. So this is personal for me though, too. When it comes to links, we're going through this process right now internally of traditionally, and what I talk about a lot in the blueprint, this is good, I'm glad we're doing this in front of people, is we've used vendors, right? When we were doing like just a straight SEO sprints model, productized service, everyone come in, gets the same thing, 3 sprints. We're basically just using link vendors. We still use a lot of link vendors, but what we're finding now is one, diminishing returns, and two, we're constantly testing new vendors, and we're like, all these vendors are getting from the same database, right? But now that we're working with the same clients over and over again, we've basically been building our own database, right? We basically have a VA who's just prospecting nonstop, finding directories, finding legal opportunities, etc. And now we're also moving into I'm trying to acquire somebody who does Haro and just bring them in-house internally and just do Haro link building. How do you guys handle links? Especially because personal injury, again, is like arguably one of the most competitive spaces on the internet. Like you cannot get results without links, without authority. How do you guys approach link building when it comes to the most competitive clients that you have?
Ooh, good question. Let's talk about the different ways to get labor in terms of leverage. So as an agency owner, you can hire a full-time employee. That is high effort because you got to train them, you got to have culture, you have to take care of them, they may leave, but you have high control. You can get that full-time employee to do whatever you want. If you have a freelancer, it is medium effort, medium control, meaning the effort's there because you don't hire a freelancer that typically doesn't know the craft. Typically, they know how to do the thing you're hiring for, but low control or medium control because someone else could hire them and take their utilization. And then you have a vendor or outsourcing, which is taboo, which is strange to say because we all eat at restaurants, right? Yeah. And we all outsource, but it's taboo, the word, right? Let's call it strategic partners. It's low control, low effort. Low control because they're an assembly line. They're making widgets. You're not going to tell them how to change their factory to make that, but it's super low effort because you hire them because they know how to make the widget, right? So that's first is the decision of what you need, right? And that different directions, right? You could go full-time employee. You could create your own database. You can do that. You could do subs and maybe a hybrid there or strategic partner. We at this time use a strategic partner because the margins, when we've done it, we've done all three. We've done in-house, we've done the subs, and we've done outsourcing. And just the amount of effort to get those extra little percentage points and the margin from subs or full-time employees wasn't worth it to me. I'd have 20 extra bodies that I had to manage and oversee, and versus just utilizing agencies where they only do link building. They have that assembly line for efficiency and all the contacts and database. The other thing too is when you concentrate spend through outsourcing, you get economies of scale. If you're only buying $10,000 worth of links a month, then you're going to get X price. But if you're spending, say, $200,000 a month, you're going to get a significant discount. And you're also going to have a little bit of leverage in terms of control. You will acquire some of that because you're such a heavily weighted client and they really want your input, and they want to retain you. That's what we do currently. We outsource links. I know you hear outsource links, you think buying, but it's still editorial outreach. We're looking for good links and good vendors. And it's that iron triangle of good, fast, and cheap. You can only get two.
Yeah.
So
we get it, man. You don't have to justify it to us.
Yeah, cool.
We're all dirty SEOs over here. We understand how it is. So are you passing that cost on? So that has a hard cost then, right? Like you're outsourcing link building, they're charging you per link, or they're charging you for a set of links, right? How do you frame that to the client? Are you telling them, hey, we're working with a PR partner, or do you just bake that into your retainer and then decide how much each month to allocate to link building?
So we've changed right now, and this may change next month. Who knows? The only thing itemized in our contract is content. It's the only thing itemized. Link building, we have a check mark. And the reason is because I want to allocate the budget to get results. And that's what they're paying for.
Yeah.
And if I have a rigid, I need to get 10 links, maybe I have an opportunity for one great link that I want to invest in. Or maybe I want to use some of that budget to do even additional content. I like flexibility to be more results oriented, to be more performance oriented. That's just how I treat it. Now, the downside to that is it's very difficult to grow an existing retainer. If you don't itemize links and you need more links, what are you going to say to them? How much you're already budgeting, right? But if you're selling hours, you can always ask for more hours. If you're selling 10 pages a month and you need more content, you can tell them, hey, we need 14. So that's the downside of when you don't itemize, it becomes more challenging. And typically you have to cross-sell into other services. That's how you extend your retainer. So cross-sell into ads or paid social or whatever.
I'll ask about that in a second, but just to wrap on this point, because we've been through it. And I think, again, so for those listening, obviously only maybe some of you here might work with attorneys, but it's important to understand this when it comes to your market position, your client avatar, right? Before, when we were working primarily with B2B SaaS, we would itemize everything because they understood exactly what went into SEO. They understood how many hours it should be for technical, how many pieces of content they should have, and what they should be paying in links. So we would itemize all that. And then we would go in being like, hey, if you want results faster, we're putting it right into this, right? Like, you want to rank faster? Let's get more links. Let's get more content. But when we started moving to attorneys, we found that it was really hard during the sales process to get them to wrap their heads around that. They were like, we don't really care what you do with the money. Just get our phone ringing and do it so we're profitable. So to your point, now we just do flat monthly cost. I do break down for them a little bit about where that money is going. So when I charge them, when they see a bill for $10,000 a month, $15,000 a month, they're not like, wow, that's a lot. I explain to them, we're only getting so much of this. We're taking this money and putting it directly into basically PR in content writing, right? There's hard costs that come along with this service, but we just button it up and be like flat fee per month. In the way that we look at it too, in terms of growing it, for us, it's less about growing it. It's more, I don't want to say setting it and forgetting it, but more about like building that long-term relationship with them, because the longer they're there, the less we do. So we're building more profitability on the account, as opposed to, because when you start adding on other services like paid social, you're also adding on a lot more time and energy and a lot more expectations versus an account that's doing well. So let's talk about that for a second, because you got to call it 10 million just doing SEO. But recently you started offering paid search, and I've also seen you doing some website stuff, but you're completely outsourcing or partnering with an outside. You don't do that in-house. Is that correct?
Good question. So if I didn't have to do design, my God, I would never do design, but it is what it is. Like, what I found is we need a great design for UX for some of the SEO components, right? We custom code everything on Gutenberg. Like, the coding side is all in-house on our team. It is. And it's our super high cost developers. The design, the creative, we do outsource. We've used a number of different agencies, Studio One, we've used Design Joy, we've used Ardent Growth, all exceptional agencies, different price points, different value they deliver. So I find that you can get a lot of people that can design something pretty. Where I had trouble, I had difficulty finding or outsourcing the coding side of it, because I'm just so picky when it comes to architecture and the SEO components and the speed and all that. And so we do all that in-house.
So when it came to, because this is something that I get asked a lot, and I guess it's easy for me because when you just look at our agency in a silo, we've traditionally only done SEO. And I'm the same with design. I won't touch design with a 10-foot pole anymore. I don't care if your website looks like it's from 1980. I'm like, go find somebody else. I'm not touching it, because to me, when it comes to managing people, there's a difference between results and expectations, right? Results are a little bit more black and white. We can put that in writing at the beginning of a contract, versus expectations, which is a little bit more up to the person, right? I see one website, I think it looks great. They think it looks like shit. I have no desire to go down that route, because I end up like QAing it. I'm the same way. And I'm like, there's no amount of money in the world that could have me like going through your.
I'm with you. Trust me, I'm with you. When I look at my P&L and I see design on it, I'm like, oh God, what am I doing?
Yeah.
Like, what am I doing? And the subjective versus objective. I'm with you.
By the way, Skylar's over here in the chat and he says, well, do not come for me to design, for the love of God. But we did start doing paid search, right? And it was easy for me to add that. And people see us now doing paid search and like, wait, hold on a second, Ryan. Like, you're telling us only do SEO in the program here, but you're also doing paid search. Like, what gives? And this comes back to this concept of offer market fit, right? To me, first of all, I have another company that does fractional CMO stuff where I have a network of people, paid search, Facebook ads, designers, developers. Over the last 10 years, I've built a network of people that I can use for different things and pull them into different projects, or hire someone full-time like I did it for paid search. So we tacked on paid search because when I started doing the sales for law firms, I found there was two main things for them. One, there's a lot of price sensitivity out there because they've just been burned by so many shit agencies before in the past. Two, though, is speed to results. And it's a mindset with some law firms. They're like, yeah, I don't really care about the money. I just need phone calls. How fast can you get them? And I was like, SEO is going to take 6 months, or we're going with this other agency then. So I was like, all right, the answer to that is paid search, and brought in a guy. And now we're doing LSAs and PPC, and it's been great. Now I have this two-pronged offer where it's like you said, it's like when you're going through building a house. I remember my contractor told me this in Spanish. He said, you can have it fast, you can have it cheap, or you can have it quality. And you can have two of the three. You can't have all three. So having that kind of two-pronged approach really allowed us to build a better pitch, and also pitch based on the needs of the client. And also now our goal is to get them doing both, because now my whole pitch, and again, this comes when you dive deep into an industry, right? I have this whole pitch now about like vertically integrated search, which is we're going to do keyword research one time. We're going to identify the keywords that are going to make you money. And then we're going to spend your money in the way that's going to deliver that in the fastest, most sustainable way, whether that's paid and organic. You're going to leave that up to us. And it's worked well for us. But you decided to start offering paid search and design. I know you do some stuff with Facebook and you're testing stuff on social. When and why did you decide to start offering other services? Did you feel like you just tapped out the market for SEO and that was the best way to grow, or what was your thought process there?
A lot of things, but one of them comes down to speed. It is quicker results, and instead of setting those expectations, and I like delivering results more quickly. The other thing too is across the industry, I see a really flawed model in terms of how they charge. Most of them charge the retroactive percentage of 15, 20%, and that disincentivizes spend. It actually causes the client to actually question whether they should bring it in-house at certain points. Very flawed, terrible model. I would go straight to performance or fixed fee. So I saw a lot of issues there. Those are a few reasons. And it's just local SEO and organic can still provide tremendous value and be a good channel for ROI. But look, the real estate, it keeps pushing it down further. And so we need to just open up a little bit more virtual real estate and being LSA and Google Ads.
Yeah, LSA is a real kicker, man. We're actually offering those for free now because it's so easy. And my paid search guys, you don't have to pay me to do this because it takes 20 minutes to set them up, and it's a coin flip. It either works or it doesn't, right? But like that placement has really effed the SERPs up a lot because it is prime real estate that they're giving up. And I understand why Google's doing it too, because they're like, look at, we're opening up a whole new market of self-service ads basically. But I think the product is still very new and it's not refined enough, and they can't really baseline results. So it's just hit or miss. So I want to transition into talking a little bit about sales. So sales and marketing, because you for the past couple of years have done a lot of marketing on social. You've got your own podcast that we were just talking about before that you actually split off into its own company. So before that though, so like getting to the initial stage of, if you think back to when you were just getting started, what were you doing to generate new business? Because the marketing and the book and all the stuff that we see now really came after you had a good amount of millions of dollars in revenue, right? So like to get to that point though, where you had the slush funds to start investing, because I think that's where most people are here. How did you get to the point where you had enough slush funds to start investing in marketing? What were you doing to generate new business?
Good question. I was bootstrapped. So at the beginning, I didn't have the capital to do a great Google ads or paid social campaign. So I was just hustling. I was doing a lot of social, a lot of traditional network marketing. One of the best things I did when I launched my agency is I was living in St. Louis at the time. And I tried to find anyone in the legal vertical that was like an influencer in a legal vertical. And I took them to breakfast or lunch. And maybe it didn't become an immediate referral relationship, but some of those absolutely were home runs. It's on My First Million, the podcast, they talk about getting belly to belly and doing that handshake and meeting someone in person. Absolutely invaluable. I was doing a lot of social media where I was answering questions and truly providing value. I took a ton of free work. Look, you don't know me. I'm going to work for free. Let's talk about price later, right? I had all this time. I didn't have a delivery option, so I had to get busy. Those are some of the things I did. I also went to other agencies. I was like, look, give me the stuff you don't want. I'll take all of them. I'll take the worst clients. Those clients that you hate, send them to me. I'll take them. And I did some of those things. I met a lot of clients in person. And looking back, I thought that's definitely an accelerator. I would just meet up with them at their office. I would put in the legwork and go and fly and do whatever. And other people aren't willing to do that. And I knew I could sell myself in person.
Yeah, me included. Yeah. It's funny because I look at a lot of the big players in the legal agency marketing space. You guys, Hennessy, a couple of other companies. And like something I notice, Maria will, but is that you guys have done a tremendous job going out and going to conferences and building relationships in person. And that's what I've realized is that we're very good on my end with marketing, advertising. I'm happy to sit on my ass in gym shorts all day and just make videos and get the clients. But I've realized that we'll never get the big fish doing that. Like we'll never get the $100,000 a month PI firm from doing that. And that's something that I've come to terms with because there's no chance of me going to a fucking conference. It's just not in my DNA. Like I'm not an in-person networker. I can do this all day, every day. People always are a little bit surprised when they see me on these videos and they meet me in person. I'm like, yeah, I'm an introvert.
Me too. So I'm not going to these conferences. I got the team going.
But you were at first though, no? I still see you on Facebook on the yachts with these attorneys getting them liquid up.
That one this year. That was the one. But my team went to 20. And I have a lot of times these sponsorships at these events are $20,000, $30,000 for a booth where you're landlocked on an island.
Yeah.
And you're the Me Too crowd, right? Hey, everyone's got a booth. Everyone looks about the same. They all do digital marketing. And it's like, how do you stand out? And so what we do is we work the crowd. Like we're out there actually doing traditional network marketing. And instead of a $20,000 deal where it's a flight and a meal where we got a couple grand in the event, and it's just a way better use of our time. So I've been to I want to say 4 conferences total in 10 years, like 4 total. My first conference I ever went to, we spent like $20,000, $30,000 on this killer booth and prime spot. We didn't get anything. And maybe it would have elevated our brand a little bit. Maybe if you do that enough times at the right ones, maybe the right strategy. And yet there were 8 other digital marketing agencies. So it was like the commodity shop, right? It's just, hey, what's your pricing? Let me go to the next booth. Well, what's your pricing? And we didn't have that differentiator, that PI specialization, or that unique mechanism of delivery that was different. So very bad move. I wasn't speaking at the time, so they wouldn't hear me speak and then come.
Yeah, that's a big differentiator. If you can speak at the event, that's obviously huge. Okay, cool. So we got a bunch of questions over here in the chat. I'm just going to start rattling them off to you from people. Again, anyone watching this, feel free to drop it in the chat over here. I'm going to start firing away at Chris over here. So Connor asked, when you present pricing, are you presenting a single custom scope price or present 3 price options for them to choose from?
Yeah, I always present 3, because here's the deal. If you there's a reason, you never ever take a picture of something, you put your hand next to it for context, and you know how big it is because it's in relation to your hand. If you just give 1, there's no context. They don't know if that's expensive or that's low. And you need to present 3. There's all kinds of psychological studies on this, and present them with different value. And when you think about this, what's the max amount of value you can provide? That should be your top one. This also helps with retention when there's an ascension model. So they start at tier 1. They know that they can go up to level 2 or level 3, right? You're always painting this better future state. So that's a long-winded way to answer that, but there you go.
No, that's fine. So when you say present more value, is that value based on outcomes like phone calls, leads, or is it based on inputs like content, links, hours?
Ooh, good question. If I had it down to a science, I would definitely do it based upon outcomes, signed cases. But value can be, if you look at value, think about an airline, right? We're all flying. You can fly in economy. You have that business class, a little bit more legroom, where you have first class. You can get on first, right? You get those better meals up front, right? But you're still just flying. Yeah. So there's a lot of ways to deliver value. A couple ways you can do it. You can do it by different services, right? Tier 1 could be local SEO. Tier 2 could be local and organic. Tier 3 could be local, organic, and LSA, right? Or you can mix and match those. You can do different deliverables. You can do different levels of experience. You can do access to the executives. You can do different time commitments. Maybe one's a month term, maybe one's a 12-month term. Maybe you include a website in one. There's so many options here available but you need to take an internal look. Like how can I provide more value to the client? And that's the other thing about niching, is when you truly understand them, you can create something specific to them that has more value.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. It's very well said. I think when you really immerse yourself, I've been through 2 salespeople this year, so I'm back doing sales and trying to hire another one. It's been really hard for me to find somebody, but it's been probably the best experience for our agency. We've been growing at a clip that we've never grown at before. And I really think it's because the amount of intel and learning that I've gotten about not just what they care about for marketing, but their business model and what they're really struggling with. Like I've realized that most of these people aren't even using spreadsheets to track leads. Like they're not doing anything. So like little things being like, what are you using for a CRM? If that's a kicker, we'll come in and set up a CRM for you. We'll train you on how to use it because it's really just a checklist for us. Now we've done it a million times. Emails, like little things like that are, again, if we're working with e-commerce and a B2B shop and SaaS and lawyers, like it's too much. Like we can never do it. But because we're only really working with one type of client, and really specifically, it's really PI for us, family law, and some criminal defense, because all the other ones we find just their customer value just isn't high enough to really justify the type of retainers that we're asking for. And we're not that bad. We're at like 5,000 a month is really like our sweet spot with a lot of these firms, but they just, no matter how, they just won't make it up. They just have to sign so many clients. And most law firms are like, I don't have the ability to sign that many clients. Like I have an intake person and that's it. I just don't have it. So I didn't know this stuff before, but having these conversations and learning about how they're structured and the different pressure points in terms of if they have attorneys, it's a whole different level of anxiety because they have to provide them leads. They have to feed them. So we've really drilled into that with our marketing messaging, and all of our marketing messaging now to go up market is basically, hey, law firm owner, like leads are keeping you up at night because if you don't provide leads to your 5 stellar attorneys, they're walking down to the next shop and they're going to get them. So we've built this kind of whole avalanche now of anxiety and pressure point on top of that we never would have known about if we didn't go through this sales process. And again, like really drilling into that industry. We also do a lot of work in the home services space, and I've had a lot of the same learnings there. And everything becomes so much easier when I show up to a call and I'm like, yo, this isn't just about marketing. This is about running your business. And I'm an expert. We can help you with this stuff. Don't worry about it. We'll take it off your plate. And it doesn't create a lot of extra work for us, but it creates so much value for them. And especially too, because I'm sure you guys are on a different tier of clientele, but we're getting a lot of pushback because there's so many lead gen agencies out there. There have always been, but they're guaranteeing leads and they're guaranteeing results. And a lot of these firms are like,
can I touch on that?
Yeah, please.
So when first, the first you did talk about the podcast, we talk about these. A lot of times people talk about podcasts for distribution or marketing to supplement their social media, but the biggest thing it is a feedback loop for education. You get to really understand your prospects, what pains they have and how to help them. And so it ends up being an incredible feedback loop for education. This right here, Ryan, where you got me on, we're shooting the bull. It's maybe there's a little nugget that someone listening here, it's, oh, okay, that can help.
For context, too, sorry to cut you off, Chris. Chris has a podcast called Personal Injury Marketing Mastermind, where he just interviews personal injury attorneys. Just for context for everyone here. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. And the thing that you were talking about in terms, once you start to understand what a case is worth and what their typical client acquisition costs are, like for me, there's in the legal space, there's like Quintessa Marketing, there's Walker Advertising, and they're selling $2,000 case acquisition costs. $2,000, no marketing. You can just go buy a case for $2,000. What does that mean for me? Now, obviously, there's different levels and qualities of the cases, but I can't be doing the marketing. Like I got to provide more value. So you may have to do performance pricing. You may have to change your model. If you're just guessing, you're out of luck. And that's where serving a ton of industries falls in line. It's hard to get that information that granular.
100%. Yeah, we come across that a lot too. And this is also where being good at sales and persuasion and connecting with people is also very helpful. I have this whole pitch about why it's so bad for them to do that, because I try and instill the fear of God with them when it comes to AI. I'm like, look, guys, AI is coming and AI doesn't give a shit about you or anything. Like it's going to wipe out 80% of your market. And if you don't have a brand, if you don't have market equity, if people don't know who you are, you're never going to make it. And you can't do that by just outsourcing the only chance for you to get equity in the market, which is marketing, which is creating value in the market. So if you want to outsource your link building, your lead generation, go for it. But you're going to come back here in 6 months and you're going to be in the exact same place. It might be a good way for you to grab some quick cash, but you can't build a business off like taking your liver out and just giving it away. Like you can't do it. So sales is also a big part of that too. And I found a lot of these people are very not easy to persuade, but they're susceptible to a pitch. And the reason why I know that is because some of these law firms, Chris, are locked into 36-month contracts with other agencies out there. And I'm like, you're a lawyer. Like, how did you sign? Like, you went through contract law and you signed this contract for 36 months. What were you thinking? They're like, yeah, I don't know. They gave me a good pitch. They're very persuasive. I'm like, okay, this is not going to work out between us here. Anyways, Skylar asked, he said, talk about your pass-through model, Chris.
Pass-through model. Skylar, elaborate. Do you mean like I'm passing through the profit margin?
Skylar, are you there? I can just unmute yourself. Just go ahead and fire away.
Yeah, you've already talked about it a little bit, Chris, when you were talking about link building, but whether it's like links, content, et cetera, I think it's an interesting thing. You could elaborate on a bit about how that's really helps with your margins when you get down to profitability. So
a lot of times, thanks, Skylar. A lot of times people will press time tracking for utilization. And when we're looking at profit margins, and I've always been a little anti that because I like to look at the outcome. Like I want someone that's more efficient and better trained that can publish content quicker. That's what I want. So I look at the outcome. I try to set KPIs there, but we set rules around certain delivery specifics. So account management, we want it around 10% or less. And that gets you, that keeps you out of trouble, right? 10% margin is in your account management, your client service. So for example, let's say your on target earnings with your fixed and variable for an account manager is $100,000. Well, you want them to manage at least $1 million, right? That keeps you out of trouble, right? That helps you determine when you need to hire. The same for link building. You can set a percentage and hey, I'm not going to exceed this percentage, right? It doesn't have to be a certain amount of links because, and then this is certainly true if you're outsourcing or using a subcontractor, like this is what goes into it. And when you set all these rules, it changes the game. Then when you get discounts, you pass through that revenue back to yourself through economies of scale, different efficiencies and things that are repeated. That's how you get additional margin. But it also helps you forecast like when you need to hire, when you need to make different decisions on how you're going to serve a client. That's a little bit on the pass through.
Next question was from Ahmed. He said, aren't the lawyers in competition to each other? Can you elaborate on how content is produced when multiple clients may need the same content? Also, can you explain how you handle the geographics, i.e. do you take clients? I think we covered that. Just you do exclusivity. So basically,
no. Let me jump in here. I got a fun one here.
Yeah.
1 is a client, 2 is a competitor, 3 is a niche. I'm kidding, but I'm not really. Here's the deal. All your clients want exclusivity, right? They're all afraid. It's all fear. They're afraid of someone else taking their revenue, but we know how local maps are. Even a proximity, an office that's a mile away may rank differently. when you're on vacation and you go to St. Louis, you type best restaurants near me and you're downtown, you're probably not going to see Soulard. You're probably not going to see Central West End. You're going to see downtown restaurants. The same for legal, these brick and mortars. But I want to coach. Okay, so geographic exclusivity, if you're a smaller agency, yes, you can use it because it does create urgency. It's urgency and scarcity. It does create urgency. Very powerful from an outbound perspective. The issue is when it comes to changing that from an opportunity cost perspective, because at the beginning, you're not charging these big rates. You're charging $2,000 a month, $5,000 a month. And now you got the whole territory locked up for $2,000 to $5,000 a month. And now you're passing it for referral 10%. Just doesn't make sense. So what we like to say, and the coaching this up to everyone here, because I would love to just get this going viral. We don't restrict our clients' ability to grow. Let me repeat that. We don't restrict our clients' ability to grow. So if you're a Philly firm and you want to open an office in Chicago, by all means, let's rock and roll. And if you start giving exclusivity to all these territories, what happens is then you can't help them in these other markets. So what are they going to do? They're going to go hire another agency. You're out of luck. So that's the number one reply. By the way, if you do this on ChatGPT, that was how I found it. And it was like a laser bolt to the head. I'm like, how did I not know this? And that's what it'll say.
Interesting. Yeah. The other thing too, I get this question a lot in the blueprint about like exclusivity. And if you're like, first of all, it's a big country. There's a lot of markets. There's also within each market, especially with law firms, there's multiple practice areas. Like PI, there's within personal injury, there's so many different practice areas. And we actually push on our clients. I'm like, yo, like you're not going to compete for personal injury. But if you go after like bike accidents, you can get some success there. So we're just going to focus on that. And also that's all you can really afford to pay us for. So that's all we're going to do. So there's so many, like, first of all, if anyone watching this is having this problem, you're making too much money to be here. That means you have so many clients that you're competing across multiple markets, right? Like it's really not an issue. And maybe it's just something that clients are asking you and you can just use Chris's response there. We're not going to restrict your ability to grow. And what I tell people too, we have one exclusivity agreement. And because the guy is paying us basically double the retainer. I'm like, if you want exclusivity in the Atlanta market, you're going to pay for it, period. That's it. If not, we're just going to have to deal with it. So he paid for it and I'm happy to do that. So a question from Umair, and this is I'll probably have questions it's time for one or two more questions. I have to jump. Do you incorporate content briefs into your content strategy? Do you get those done in-house or do you hire a vendor or freelancer, et cetera? Do you use any AI to automate content?
Yes, for a period of time, for 8-9 years, we outsourced all of our content. When AI came around, we started utilizing, we have a whole prompt library and it's like a hybrid, right? It's a combination of AI plus the in-house. And what we found is Google keeps emphasizing, at least from an SEO perspective, content freshness, especially in your money, your life space, which is the medical, finance, legal. If you get sick and you Google, what are my symptoms? And you see an article from 2016, like next, right? I'm going to 2023. Same for legal. Like I want to see 2023. So content freshness, and we moved to more in-house writers because of speed to use AI. Guys, I'll be honest. I was paying at scale anywhere from 10 to 12 cents a word. Some areas, maybe 15 or more, right? 15 cents. Maybe you could get a little less. Maybe you could get 0.8 with some little international arbitrage, but let's just say 10 to 12 cents. When I moved it in-house, the cost equivalent for me was about 4 cents a word to 5 cents a word. Now, I know I said the model previously about these other ways you can do things with strategic partners or subs, but we found a significant decrease in cost when we went in-house.
Yeah, I think also too, just a side lesson here is how much money you were pushing out a good majority of your service and still continue to leverage strategic partnerships, but the business has not suffered or grown. And I think part of it is the fact that you're working with a client where you can be like, okay, we have a big amount of retainer here. I'm going to take this money and I'm going to allocate it to people that are really experts, even if I'm paying a little bit more. That's fine, because what matters the most is results. So I think it's amazing. First of all, appreciate you coming on, man. I know you're a busy dude, super successful, and shared a lot of knowledge here with the people here. The reason why I like to bring people like Chris on here is because when it comes to building an agency, there's no one way to do it. Part of this, what we want to give you here is a framework that's proven, that works. Find the right client, build the right offer, productize your work. But at the same time, there's so many different ways to do that. Like Chris and I were talking about how we're introverts. We don't want to go to conferences. If you are not an introvert, go to conferences, right? There's so many different ways to build this business. And part of this is finding what works for you. So yeah, Chris, again, appreciate your time. Appreciate everyone here for showing up. We will post this inside of the Blueprint community, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, everyone.
Cheers. Thanks, guys. Thank you.